Although not well known to the domestic media, on May 13, a Japanese company called Japan Display announced a new OLED technology called eLEAP that did not use a fine metal mask and used a semiconductor photoprocess to dramatically improve performance. Quoting the title of the presentation material as it is as follows. JDI develops eLEAP, a historical innovation in OLED display performance, using the world's first maskless deposition process in photolithography, two-fold emission efficiency, two-fold maximum brightness, and three-fold lifetime improvement. I don't know if the information leaked ahead of time or if there was another reason, but the stock price of JDI, which had been wandering around the bottom, began to soar shortly before the announcement and almost doubled. If we accept the content as it is like a declaration that the deposition method using fine metal mask used by Samsung Display or LGD is no longer competitive, at least in terms of performance. For both companies, especially Samsung Display, profits are generated from small and medium-sized OLEDs that use fine metal masks, so it is an announcement that is extremely tense for a domestic company. JDI of Japan, which announced this time, is a display company jointly invested by Sony, Hitachi, and Toshiba, and has supplied small and medium-sized LCD displays to Apple, but sales are rapidly declining due to Apple's adoption of OLED. The biggest weakness of OLED is that burn-in occurs due to degradation of organic matter when used for a long time or brightly. According to JDI's announcement, eLEAP technology has the characteristics to maintain the same lifespan even if the screen brightness is doubled. In other words, if you set it to the existing brightness, you can increase the lifespan by 3 times. In addition, an image related to how the panel will change after 5 years if the display is used for 3 hours a day with a brightness of 600 nits is also attached to the presentation. After 5 years, the brightness of the panel looks quite different. The reason for this difference from the method of using the existing fine metal mask is that the aperture ratio can be increased. By using the photolithography process widely used in semiconductor processes instead of FMM, very precise patterning of subpixels is possible, and as a result, it is possible to secure 60%, which doubles the aperture ratio compared to the FMM method in high-resolution panels. This is a very important concept, so let's take a pixel composed of one white subpixel instead of RGB as an example. Assume that the pixel on the left has 30% of the light emitting area within the pixel, that is, the aperture ratio is 30%. It is assumed that the pixel located on the right is a pixel with a light emitting area of 60% with twice the aperture ratio. When we look at the pixel from a distance, we cannot distinguish the shape of the minute pixel or the size of the emitting area with the naked eye, but we perceive only the brightness proportional to the amount of current injected into the pixel. If you look closely at 2 pixels that emit the same brightness from a distance, they will look like this. Since the area that emits light is doubled, the amount of current injected per unit area for a pixel with an aperture ratio of 30% is double that of a pixel with an aperture ratio of 60%. In other words, a pixel with a low aperture ratio is abused by a high current density. In OLED, it is generally known that when the current density is reduced by half, the lifetime increases by a factor of 3. Therefore, a pixel with an aperture ratio of 60% has a lifespan of 3 times that of a pixel with an aperture ratio of 30%, and JDI's announcement is based on this. The FMM method is greatly affected by the thickness of the metal mask, the distance between the mask and the substrate, and the distance between the pixels, whereas the photolithography method is a technology that can sufficiently implement even very fine pixels, as we have already seen in image sensors for digital cameras. Then, the biggest question is whether RGB patterning is really possible with the photolithography process using solvents for OLED composed of organic materials as JDI claims. This JDI announcement does not include details. However, if you look at the papers and patents related to OLED patterning using lithography recently announced by a Belgian research institute called IMEC, which has been conducting similar research for a long time, you can understand how the solvent process proceeds without damage to organic matter. In addition, according to the recent announcement of IMEC, there is no difference in lifespan when compared head-to-head with the same area as the OLED device using the FMM process. However, after the lithography process, the driving voltage appears to have risen compared to the device using the FMM. It is unknown whether JDI has solved the drive voltage increase problem, but considering the fact that it has higher efficiency compared to FMM at a high aperture ratio, I think the drive voltage issue has also been resolved. Now, what kind of destructive power will JDI's eLEAP technology have in the OLED industry? Can it wipe out all the old FMM methods? Let's look at it logically. Devices where the display is right in front of your eyes, such as VR or AR, require an ultra-high-resolution display, and a display that far exceeds the 400 to 600 ppi resolution of the currently used FMM method. For resolutions above 1000 ppi, eLEAP is probably the most competitive way. This is especially true because it is relatively easy to secure the aperture ratio even at high resolution. Then, how about the competitiveness of eLEAP in mobile phone applications, where OLED is most competitive? A very interesting match is expected from here. According to JDI's announcement, there is clearly enough competitiveness compared to the FMM method in terms of performance, but the problem is the cost issue. If OLED panel is produced by eLEAP method, you can use the relatively inexpensive inline vaporizer used for white OLED production instead of the expensive cluster OLED vaporizer that requires very precise alignment while using FMM. However, since the entire process consists of 3 repetitions of deposition and photolithography, not all deposition processes are completed at once like white OLED or FMM methods. For example, after vacuum deposition for red OLED formation, the substrate is removed from the evaporator and then the lithography process is performed. After putting the substrate back into the vacuum evaporator, the vacuum deposition process for green OLED formation is performed. Then, the substrate is taken out again and lithography is performed, and finally, a deposition process for blue OLED formation and a long process of lithography must be performed. Lastly, since the metal deposition process that forms the electrode has to be added, the panel manufacturing process of eLEAP method does not use FMM, but the whole process is very long and complicated. Considering that contamination by small particles during each process has a very serious effect on the panel manufacturing yield, how much yield can the eLEAP process, which has to go back and forth between vacuum, coating, and lithography processes, can secure? It will be of utmost interest. From that point of view, obviously, it seems very likely that early production will be limited to small area ultra-high resolution displays. In my personal opinion, if it is not for applications that require very high resolution, such as AR or VR, it would be much more efficient and cost-effective to process the process with the RGB double layer OLED mentioned in the previous video. Compared to the single-stack OLED, this method also doubles the brightness or improves the lifespan by 3 times, so I think it is a method that is much more stable and provides a higher yield than the eLEAP method. Of course, from a short-term perspective. What do you guys think? That's it for today. Goodbye.